I'd like to share the fact that our people have a beautiful reputation and tradition of looking after the country. The country was pristine up till 227 years ago, and it's been a struggle for us to continue our role in looking after the country. That's our now, regardless what the law courts and all that say, we still hold very strongly that we have an obligation to look after this country. It's, as you can imagine, it's a very hard job. We've been made quite powerless, and we're a minority. And in fact, 5% of my mother's traditional country is natural. The rest of it's been destroyed. Now, a whole lot of us, my family, have moved up to the mountains because this is the most western area of my mother's country where we can live with trees. And it's done us well. We've got World Heritage Area all around us. We've actually, up here we have one of the strongest Aboriginal communities. It's a vital community. We've been growing in strength. We look after each other, and we've begun to connect with the country again. We have camps out in the bush, and the way we connect with country, we sit with it in stillness and we listen to the country. Now, having those planes go overhead, that just trashes everything. It was the last wild river, the Gross Valley, for us. We thought it had protection from national parks. We thought it had extra protection from the World Heritage Area, but it seems that if this proposal goes ahead, it's just trashed the last bit of our country. Now, we're the people that showed Governor Phillip where the damn water was. Yeah, what a mistake that was. Now, they took this country off us because, according to them, we weren't looking after it properly. Well, my goodness. Time to take it back, I think. But we don't want to do that. We want to share the country. We want to have a beautiful, healthy country that's going to be passed on to our generations, as we've done for thousands and thousands of years. The rest of the world's waking up that we need our natural areas. We're, in the Gross Valley at Govett Sleep, I tell an important dreaming story there. I call it a white fella's dreaming story, but it's an important one. It's the most important one in that valley for me, and it's where the birth of the conservation or the environmental consciousness happened down there in the Blue Gum Forest. That's how I present it to people. Well, I'm going to look silly telling that story when I have to stop, as I did when I was being interviewed up at my camp. When a plane passed overhead, we had to stop the interview, wait till it passed. Well, I'm going to look quite stupid telling us how Australians have woken up to their responsibilities and their
Sorry, Chris.
No worries.
Time's expired, but eloquent.
Bless you. You heard me.
You will recall that World Heritage was declared over the Greater Blue Mountains area in 2000, and that just a couple of weeks ago we celebrated the 15th anniversary. You will know that that inscription was based upon the unique qualities of the Blue Mountains, including the fact that large amounts of it are wilderness. You will know that a development affecting a World Heritage Area must receive the approval of the Federal Minister for the Environment under the Environment Protection Biodiversity Conservation Act. This is a consequence of our treaty obligations under the World Heritage Convention. You may know that the major management document for the World Heritage Area at the moment is a strategic plan signed off by state and federal environment ministers. And I just want to read you one paragraph. It says, "The undisturbed natural environment is one of the important qualities that attracts residents to live in areas adjoining the Greater Blue Mountains area. Potential threats to the appreciation of the area's aesthetic values include inappropriate lighting, as well as overflights by helicopters, low-flying jets and other aircraft. A Fly Neighbourly program has previously been established in the Blue Mountains National Park to minimise the impact of aircraft, but this needs to be reviewed and made stronger and more extensive controls applied." That was written into a plan, a formal government-supported plan in 2008. They said, it's not good enough with the existing arrangements, we've got to make them better. What we now have is an environmental impact statement that suggests that we will crisscross the whole Blue Mountains, including large areas of wilderness, with commercial jet flights, and they haven't even measured or predicted the noise impacts against a natural background. They've done it on the basis of a noise measurement you might take in an urban area. This EIS is most extraordinarily botched and disappointing and utterly unsatisfactory. I just want to add this. 2 years ago, the Abbott government went out of its way to attack the idea of World Heritage. You may recall that World Heritage had been declared over the tall eucalypt forests of Tasmania 3 years ago, and 2 years ago the Abbott government tried to undo that declaration. They were rebuffed by the World Heritage Committee of UNESCO amid really, it was an ignominious end for the government's attempt to undermine World Heritage. But here it is essentially beginning to happen again. And I would like to ask, really, if the Turnbull government is as unconcerned about the values of World Heritage as the Abbott government has been in the past.
Thank you very much.
Our children can expect a plane every 8 minutes during the day and every 18 minutes throughout the night. This increases to a plane every 4 to 6 minutes, 24/7, only 1,500 metres above homes in 2050. Research has shown that aircraft noise differs from train and traffic noise, as it is unpredictable and it varies. This has a greater effect on children's reading and cannot be compared to traffic noise. The point merger system places an unfair noise burden on our children, causing disruption at school, sleep deprivation, which is also linked to negative health and social outcomes. Our group is demanding the same treatment and legislation for all communities and vulnerable groups in Western Sydney. Kingsford Smith Airport has a cap on the number of planes per hour and a curfew. They use the ocean, so only 45% of planes go over the land. They spread the noise by implementing a star system where flight paths are rotated, so no Sydney school or Sydney home has to endure planes every 4 to 6 minutes, 24/7. There is no reason why this same world-class system couldn't be used for a second Sydney airport. Research shows a direct link between noise pollution and its negative impact on learning. It can cause children to read more slowly, reduces their performance in tests like the HSC, causes developmental delays, and it interferes with children's motivation, memory, language, attentiveness, concentration, and speech. In particular, aircraft noise also causes children to have elevated blood pressure, increased stress hormones, strokes, and heart disease. Children are more at risk from air pollutants and breathe in double the amount of air from adults. We already have high asthmatic rates, and toxic aircraft emissions will cause increased lung and respiratory problems. Our educational environments are quieter compared to other urban settings. We require a more rigorous study into the EIS and implementation of best practice flight paths. They must consider the unique topography, the effect this has on noise distribution, and accurately estimate aircraft noise, especially for freight planes. Our Prime Minister has stated he has a lifetime commitment to supporting education. We call on the government to live up to their word and ensure that no child in Western Sydney has their educational opportunities threatened by a federally funded development. Our group seeks best practice and advocates for a change, including fully engaging Kingsford Smith Airport to 100% capacity and considering fast rail, removing the point merger system, equitable sharing of plane noise like the star system used in Sydney, limiting and setting noise limits and air pollution limits, moving the second airport to a place which will not send large volumes of flights over our World Heritage and community areas.
Speaker's
Thank
time.
you.
Oh, nicely done.
I'm a retired scientist and I have worked in the field of industrial health for over 30 years. I'm here to talk about the noise aspect from the planes. The draft noise EIS uses noise contour charts for noise acceptability as defined in Australian Standard AS 2021. If you go to the Western Sydney Airport website and click onto the noise modelling tool, you can find out the ANEC noise contour for your home. There are 3 different types of aircraft noise contour charts referred to in the standard: the ANEF, ANEC and ANEI. Of these, the standard states that the ANEF contour chart is the only one of the 3 which is intended to have status in land use planning decisions. The EISs are using ANEC modelling contours, which are estimated guesses. I call them guesstimates. From the noise modelling tool, some people will think that they will not be affected by noise. For example, for the year 2030, Springwood Public School is given an ANEC value of less than 20, which the EIS considers acceptable, in spite of the fact that there will be 30 to 40 planes flying overhead during the day. The ANEC value for our home in Valley Heights for the year 2030 is also less than 20, but we will have 30 to 40 planes flying overhead during the day, 10 to 20 during the evening, and 10 to 20 during the night. All this is considered acceptable by the EIS. The use of ANES contour charts in this manner is contrary to the requirements of the Australian Standard, and people can be misguided if they use them. However, a major problem also lies with the Australian Standard. It does not address noise contour in outdoor spaces, and it is not sympathetic to people's noise exposure. The standard is a guideline and is irrelevant for the Blue Mountains, which has ambient noise levels well below that of cities. Our bedroom has a noise level of about 25 dBA. The standard considers 50 dBA to be adequate for bedrooms. This is about 256 times higher than our current noise level in the bedroom. Please be aware that for each 3 dB increase, the noise level doubles.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Christian. I was momentarily nervous there when you talked about noise levels in the bedroom. The next speaker is Mr. Keith Muir.
The Foundation is the original proponent of the World Heritage Area, and we've had a lot to do with the national parks and wilderness areas in New South Wales and in particular in the Blue Mountains. We urge the Council to continue its opposition of this terrible proposal, which will seriously impact upon the World Heritage Area. You have done a fantastic job. We urge you to bring the community groups that are opposing this airport together, and together we can build an even stronger alliance towards stopping this proposal. Please take that request on board. The noise impacts, I know that from way back in the dark ages, when we were opposing helicopter noise in the 90s, that background is 23 to 25 dBA out there in the Blue Mountains National Parks. So a 2-aisle twin-engine aeroplane which carries 250 people will emit between 5,000 and 6,000 feet, about 63 to 67 dBA, and that's about 2 orders of magnitude at least louder than background. So you're really getting a significant amount of noise for those 10 seconds that aeroplane passes overhead. And that has not been considered in any way mitigated by the EIS. There are ways of doing it. They didn't even consider it. And I think that from what I'm hearing, the World Heritage Area is where the noise is going to be shifted to. And I really oppose that, and the Colong Foundation will fight it to the end. Now, the other key issue is air quality in Western Sydney. People will die as a result of this airport. In fact, it's in the EIS. The mortality rates are in the EIS. And there are, after only 5 years, exceedances of air quality standards for fine dust particles and nitrous oxides. That's a small fraction of what this airport will generate, and it is generating those impacts mainly from vehicular traffic. That is just unacceptable, and yet they could think about bringing a train in. It's not there. There are no criteria or triggers in this proposal to do anything to protect the health of Western Sydney. It's been known for many years that it's got air quality pollution problems, and that is, I think, fatal to the location of the airport in Western Sydney. It's absolutely abhorrent that a proposal kills people. And I think the Blue Mountains Conservation Society's submission makes that point very strongly. So together we are more stronger than individuals. This council has done a fantastic job. Anybody who's desperate to get a submission in, we've got a web form on our site. If you've got people that are half keen and don't, will click on something but do nothing else, point them our way. We've got a form for them. So thank you very much, and together we'll go forward and stop this thing.
I'm speaking tonight because I support environmentally responsible infrastructure development, which means I have to be against these flight paths and the building of a second Sydney airport. Tonight I want to talk about strategy and how we can give ourselves a chance of winning this campaign. To win, the campaign needs to be much more than a Blue Mountains campaign. It needs to be much more than a Western Sydney campaign. It needs to become a national campaign and an election issue for the next federal election. So how do we make this campaign a national issue? It's not hard. The case against a second airport in Western Sydney is about much more than noisy flight paths and protecting the environment. It is about what sort of a society we want Australia to be. What is our vision for the future? Are we to be a modern, forward-looking society taking advantage of innovative new technology and new transport systems such as high-speed rail? To reduce our carbon footprint? Or are we to continue to rely on last-century fossil fuel-driven technology and transport, which will leave us lagging behind the rest of the world? That is the question that this campaign asks, and that is the question that will take the Blue Mountains from an iconic Australian attraction on the tourist map and put us centre stage on the political map as we take this issue to the Australian people. Will the lucky country become the stupid country that misses the boat when it comes to the new employment opportunities that are opening up as the rest of the world charges ahead with innovative schemes to replace fossil fuel and transport networks with alternative sources of energy production and transportation? Will we be known as the country that trashes a World Heritage Area by building an airport, and an unnecessary airport at that, on its doorstep? The campaign to protect the environment and preserve the quality of life in the Blue Mountains asks a very big question. It asks, where is Australia heading when it comes to creating a dynamic and productive low-carbon economy and a healthy environment for us all to live? This is the same question that's being asked by the campaigns against coal seam gas and the campaigns to protect the Great Barrier Reef. What sort of a future do we want? Environmental and economic mayhem and disaster caused by backward-looking policies, or a bright, clean future for our children and grandchildren based on innovative green technology? High-speed rail is part of that bright, clean future. Let's put high-speed rail on the political agenda as part of this campaign to protect our mountains. Let's put environmentally responsible infrastructure development on the political agenda as we fight to preserve our way of life in this very special part of the world.
I think the case has been so strongly put that there is no need for this airport. Sydney Airport has the capacity. The case has been put on health grounds, on environmental grounds. Our great strength, and it's what I would like to really concentrate on, is there's so many people here. Bob Debus and I, I'm sure, would agree that when you sit in Parliament, you know you can get so much more done when there is a strong public voice. We're coming into Christmas, and I imagine you all have relatives across the state, across the country. We need to start the conversation that this airport is dumping on the Blue Mountains, is dumping on the people of Western Sydney, and must not go ahead. The point's just been made. It can be a key issue in this election campaign. It's robbing money from infrastructure that is badly needed. We do not need this project under any circumstances. Having the vision for transport for the 21st century, high-speed rail, it is there, it is ready to go. This is where that seed money from the airport should be directed. And I did just want to concentrate on the World Heritage listing. I'm so pleased to see Keith Muir here and deeply congratulate him for all that work. It went over decades to get this listing. And the Howard government was warned about the threat to the World Heritage listing if this proposal, if the Badgery Creek Airport went ahead. So we knew that, the country knew that. This project should never have been put up. And it's not just a matter of flight paths. Whatever, the flight paths are very serious in the way they are structured. But whichever way the planes come in, they pose a threat to the unique environment of this national park and its World Heritage listing. We can't risk that. Remember where you live, where I visit. This area is the second most visited area in New South Wales, and the Blue Mountains National Park is the most visited park in Australia. That reputation would be trashed overnight if this airport goes ahead. These planes would be dumping fuel. The particulate pollution would simply be unacceptable. The noise pollution would turn your lives into misery, and all those unique species, that habitat in the Blue Mountains National Park would be trashed in a way that we have never seen before in a national park in this country. The evidence is in. Our job now is to go forward, start those conversations over your Christmas dinner. You can start this conversation. I'm not one for injecting politics into Christmas, but seriously, this is the time. We've got the case, we've got the evidence, you've heard about what would happen to school children, you know about your own lives, you know what would happen to the reputation of this area. It cannot happen. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Actions speak louder than words, and my actions show my deep concerns about this EIS. For the last 2 months, I've stood on railway stations handing out flyers, organised public forums in the lower and upper mountains, written to P&Cs and how wonderfully they've responded, door-knocked at weekends, lobbied Labor colleagues alongside Senator Doug Cameron, who sends his apologies tonight. He's on parliamentary business interstate. And I've stood with my community to raise people's awareness about the horrifying prospect that has been put to us. But in case there is any doubt, let me make it clear. I am opposed to this airport.
And Janie, since we're friends, my mispronunciation of the surname is really embarrassing.
It's not just the flight paths, which surely must be an ambit claim by government. It's not just the lack of curfew. It's not just the threat to World Heritage, which as a state and nation we've pledged to protect. It's not the lack of a rail link from day one and some weird belief that the M4 with a toll will cope with the traffic. It's not just the lack of detail in the EIS, which means so many things are left to be guessed at. What really angers me is the way in which the Turnbull government tried to slip this under the radar as we head towards Christmas holidays. To promise community consultation and then to offer none, to refuse to extend deadlines in spite of the thousands of people who've signed my petition and other community activist petitions pleading for that. that they seriously thought they would get away with one single 2-hour information session providing glossy brochures staffed by under-equipped marketing people who really you just had to feel sorry for. And I bet they'd urged for danger money when they decided to come up to the mountains. Contrast this to Labor's approach when there was consideration of opening the RAF base at Richmond to civilian flights. Before an EIS was even thought of, there was a large public meeting at Windsor in which senior bureaucrats from the department came and, wait for it, answered people's questions. They sat in a big room and took as many questions as needed to be asked and provide what answers they could at that very early stage of a process. That's real community consultation. But we got none of that. Our concerns got dismissed. As a community, I believe that our actions over the last 2 months and our response to the EIS show that no government can take us for granted. Those of you who are here tonight who've been involved in the campaign to date, you know what you've done. And if this government thinks that the deadline for the EIS marks the end of our opposition, they don't know us, they don't know the Blue Mountains.
Thank you.
Most of the comments regarding flight paths and merge points and impact are solely related to the lower mountains. The upper Blue Mountains flight path is horrific. It will impact the upper mountains. It doesn't kick in till the second runway comes into being, but it needs to be in the draft EIS, it really does. And also, sorry, I've lost my place here. On the same vein, on page 15 under the recommendations and point 6 with the proposed letter to the Minister for Infrastructure and Regional Development, Warren Truss, in these business papers, seeking assurance that the proposed and unacceptable concentration of aircraft and merge point above the lower Blue Mountains shown in the short-term plan of flight paths will be ruled out. It does not include the upper mountains flight paths, and it must include those, because these flight paths, if this EIS is approved with those flight paths can be used. And if it rules out the lower mountains, then it can use the upper mountains. And I do acknowledge they are indicative only, but they still will be available to be used. Thank you.
Look, folks, I want to address the whole issue of the contempt with which this community has been held by the federal government and their boffins. 15 years ago, that's all, 15 years ago, it was knocked on the head. The Howard government, for all a host of reasons, said it was no good. In that 15 years, the boffins and the governments have sat on their hands. They thought of no creative solutions about Western Sydney's transport problems, no futuristic things like high-speed rail. They sat on their hands and waited for the propitious political moment to come along. And so now we've got it again. It's in front of us. It's inevitable. As soon as Abbott announced it, the Murdoch media, you know, News Limited, you want the truth or do you want your News Limited? The people of Western Sydney have had it limited all right. They've had no negative comment about the airport allowed in any of their papers. And they run most of the papers down there in Western Sydney. They have done nothing but cheer squad this airport and say it's inevitable. You can't stop it. You have no power. It's coming. Suck it in. Too bad, you people. It's been decided. And now all of a sudden they're saying, oh, we're going to actually, we need to consult you. We're going to consult you in this EIS. We're going to hear you now. Well, I'm going to consult you right now. I'm going to ask you and I want you to answer loud and clear. Do you accept this airport as it is presently configured to be built at Badgery's Creek? No! Can you be a bit clearer? No! If they fiddled with it and they made the approaches and the flight paths and they put them out over the heritage site or down over the people of Western Sydney, would you accept it then? No! Do you mean Louise is wasting her time? Yes! Because that's what she's fighting for. She's fighting for it somewhere else. Because you people are kicking up too much of a stink. Too much of a stink, let me say. I'll tell you now, this consultation is going to send it right back. I want to quote something. Oh God, I want to quote from the EIS, and it's on air quality and greenhouse gases, and it's a lie that's been spread throughout this whole thing, and that is that this airport hardly has any CO2 emissions whatsoever. A mere 0.1% of carbon emissions come from this airport. Of course, that only counts scope 1 and 2 emissions, what happens on the actual ground. That's what an airport is, you see. It's not about aeroplanes taking off or anything like that. No. This is about the emissions of the ground. But if you count scope 3 emissions, 30 seconds, if you count scope 3 emissions, 2.5 million tonnes are going to be dumped on this area in 2030.
You do it to me every time, Bob. You know I can take your citizenship off you.
You may recall at the last Blue Mountain City Council extraordinary meeting on Thursday the 5th of November 2015, I spoke in opposition to the then agenda number 2 recommendations 2, 3 and 5. I was not surprised that Council unanimously voted for all the recommendations at that meeting. It was as I expected, and that's fine by me. I'm here tonight again to speak in opposition to the Council's proposed submission as it currently stands. The Council's proposed submission is missing a key and compelling argument against the proposed Western Sydney Airport. I know Council could and should do better at prosecuting its case. On the 30th of November, I sent my own hard copy submission to the Australian Government Department of Infrastructure and Regional Development Western Sydney Unit, and a few days later confirmed with a staff member it had been received. The key point I made in my own submission is as follows. The success of the proposed Western Sydney Airport is critically dependent upon the aviation industry continuing to access abundant and affordable aviation fuels. Evidence shown in my submission indicates this is unlikely to be maintained much beyond this decade, perhaps sooner, unless new, effective, affordable, abundant sources of compatible aviation fuels and/or alternate energy fuel propulsion technologies are developed and deployed extensively before 2030. Time and scale of task constraints makes this prospect unlikely. In the shadow of a looming global post-peak oil regime, high-speed rail, like the one proposed by Beyond Zero Emissions, has a far greater potential to thrive and prosper, whereas aviation as it is currently configured is likely to wither substantially unless new effective technologies are urgently developed and deployed. Last time I addressed Council, I recommended you look at my submission number 36 to the Australian Senate inquiry into Australia's transport energy resilience and sustainability, and my April 9 public hearing testimony recorded in Hansard on the Australian Parliament website to gain an overview of the looming energy security challenges. It seems many politicians, including councillors here, appear to me unwilling to acknowledge our looming energy security challenges. It's perhaps why Council's proposed submission is less compelling than I believe it could be. Last Thursday, I emailed to Mayor Greenhill and Council a copy of my draft submission concerning the proposed Western Sydney Airport. I believe the information contained therein should be employed to supercharge Council's proposed submission. I think we all agree that the proposed Western Sydney Airport is an inappropriate, enormously costly mistake that is highly unlikely to succeed. Make Council's objections count by highlighting all compelling arguments. I urge all councillors here to heed this information presented and amend Council's submissions accordingly. Oppose the Western Sydney Airport.
Thank you.
Support high-speed rail initiatives. You know it makes sense.
Thank you. All right.
I really am underqualified to add much to many of the people who've already spoken tonight, so I'm going to keep it very short. Just to say that the Greens commit to, through the election campaign and through every other means available to us, supporting this council and this movement to prevent the building of this airport. I just want to make a couple of points. One is I wholeheartedly endorse Chris Tobin's first speech. I work with Indigenous students at Western Sydney University, many of them Darug people, and I know that Darug people have a word for this country, for their country, which is Ngura. And Ngura means not just your camp or your home, but your spiritual home. And that Badgery's Creek area, Chris didn't mention this, that Badgery's Creek area is full of Indigenous sites and relics, and these are not to be simply trampled on or shifted or moved. I also want to just raise a little word of caution or alarm, if you like, and that is that I've also, like Susan, been handing out literature on railway stations lately, and I'm getting an overwhelming support from most people, the vast majority of people. Very little dissent from the idea that this airport should be stopped. But what I am getting is quite a lot of pessimism from people. People saying, oh, it's a done deal, we can't do anything about it. And I think that's the thing that we really need to tackle in this campaign. We need to convince people that it is not a done deal, and this gathering here tonight indicates very clearly that we can do something about it. And I just want to finish by saying I am against this airport, and so is my party. Thank you.
As a community, we have a moral obligation to protect and preserve our societal values, environment, health and amenity. Actually, that's the role of government, but they have a history of making pretty bad decisions, and this one's an absolute whopper. Don't forget though, community were the people that stopped the Franklin River from being dammed. It was community that stopped the destruction of the Rocks precinct in Sydney Cove, and it was community that stopped the Badgery Creek Airport in 1998. The Southwest Sydney Basin has got to be the dumbest place in the world for an airport. But more than that, a second airport is just not needed. Even with an hourly cap and a curfew, Sydney operates today with 40% excess capacity. Sydney Airport will not reach a perceived maximum capacity for another 2 decades. Thank God for iPad. Yes. I would just like to say, imagine if we had an innovative and smart government, one that was thinking beyond planes and could embrace trains, and that argument's been put forward more eloquently than me earlier on. The Western Sydney Airport is designed to cater for 82 million passengers a year, and that's twice the size of Sydney Airport. And today that would make it the 3rd largest airport on the planet. It will be the largest earth-moving project since the Snowy Mountain scheme. Not sure people realise that. It will take 6 years to pulverise, flatten and concrete the rolling green hills of the southwestern Sydney Basin. This is an absolute destruction waiting to happen. Can we trust the government on flight paths? Sure. Mr Truss tells us they are only indicative, but he'll get back to us in 2025. With airspace to the east already occupied by Sydney, the west is the only way to go. There is no avoiding flight paths over our communities, our drinking water catchment areas and our World Heritage National Park. But don't despair, my friends. The 1998 EIS failed the professional and public scrutiny test, and the current tendentious and shabby EIS is heading in the very same direction. The idea is fundamentally unsound, and no amount of marketing material can dress it up. We, the community, are rising and we will be heard. Buckle up, friends. This is a long campaign and failure is not an option. Talk to family, talk to friends, contact your local elected representatives and federal and state, but above all, act and act now. Have your voice heard, write your submission, do it and do it now for our community. Thank you.
I am a lecturer in mechanical engineering at Western Sydney University. I've read the environmental impact statement and other fact sheets spruiking the benefits of the airport at Badgery Creek. Unlike Mascot, where the flights approach in all different directions, distributing the noise amongst everyone, and they only arrive between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. Every flight coming into Badgery's Creek will emerge 24 hours a day, just 1,300 metres above Blaxland. There will be a virtual airport just 1,300, less than 1 kilometre, or just over 1 kilometre above Blaxland. The report claims that this will result in a noise level of 60 decibels over Blaxland. However, it gives no indication of where this figure comes from or what it means. It has literally been plucked out of the air. I have been investigating some facts about noise levels myself. I've found that the consensus is that a Boeing 737 at 1850, not 1,300, but 1850 metres, produces 90 decibels of sound. Not 60, but 90. Not much of a difference, only 50% difference. No, because of the log scale, that difference will be 8 times louder than they're claiming. It will be, rather than conversational level, it will be as loud as a motorcycle at 7.5 metres or a lawnmower. Believe me, when a plane comes over, you won't hear your neighbour mowing their lawn. These numbers are literally pie in the sky. So at the moment, we have no idea what to expect. No one knows what to expect. The first indication of what the noise will be like will be 3 a.m. one morning in 2025 when the first flight arrives. By that time, it will actually be a bit too late to stop the airport. Now, why hasn't someone chartered a 747 and flown it over the proposed flight paths? At 3 a.m, of course. This will enable the voters of the marginal seats of Western Sydney to have a chance to hear what we're in for and what is the government trying to hide. There's also talk of improving tourism. I don't know whether they're planning on having the businessman who arrives at 5 a.m. on his way to a city to a meeting in the centre of Sydney. I don't know whether they're expecting him to pop up to the Blue Mountains to sit in the tranquil quietness and wonder what it used to be like. Or are they expecting the family of 4 people just arrived from a 24-hour flight from North America or Europe to lug all their luggage up to the top of the Blue Mountains just for the fun of it, despite jet lag and everything else they'll be suffering? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was having a cup of tea this afternoon, thinking about all of this, and 4 very loud, noisy, disruptive, horrible planes flew over about within a space of 20 minutes. I had to close the window. It's a hot day. I didn't want to do that. This is about our lives, our everyday lives. This is happening now. Imagine what's to come. You see, this is about people. This is about you and me. This is about our futures. I not only moved to the Blue Mountains 5 years ago for a life, a quality of life, a beautiful quality of life, I also invested in a livelihood. I had the temerity to invest and to make plans to have a place where people could come to get away from the city and enjoy serenity and quietness in the beautiful Blue Mountains bush. Let me tell you, I was at a retreat on the weekend in Lura. About 150, 200 people had come from all over New South Wales. We were outside enjoying the bush, and of course the comment inevitably came, "What is it with these planes?" And then over our organic vegetarian lunch that day, a few people made the comment, or one person made the comment, "You know what? I've heard there's another retreat place in so-and-so a town. It's really quiet." Someone said, "Could you give me the name of that?" This is now. Imagine what's to come. I'm hosting friends at the moment, a young fellow from Sweden, a lovely girl from America, young, energetic. They went into Wentworth Falls. They said, "Give us the hardest walk you can find." They went all the way down to the bottom, not just halfway, all the way down. They camped overnight, good on them. They survived. They had a great time. And they came back. How was it? They said, "We've done a lot of walks in many countries." They said it was the most beautiful we've ever done. I was as pleased as punch. I was so proud. They said, "But what is it with those planes? We couldn't see anything but beautiful bush We came for serenity. We wanted to get away. And yet they were there. They've cut short their visit. They'll go somewhere else to hike. This is now. Imagine what's to come. I've got a proposal for that. This is going to affect everyone, not just us small people, but it's going to affect everyone. I want to invite the tourism industry to get on board. Where's the big end of town here? Where are the big players? The Hydro Majestic and their friends will be impacted. The Fairmont Resort, all of those big resorts. There's local people now putting in their money to get posters and printing done out of their own money. We need these big corporate organisations who will also be impacted, who have also made huge investments. We need them to get on board. We need them to get on board now and put their money where, well, because this is going to impact them, so they need to be in it together with us all together. Speaking of which, if this does happen, we need to go down to Badgery's Creek when the bulldozers come. Chris can help us set up a camp, and we need to sit there. We like to camp. We're used to the cold, and we'll sit there and camp out and make sure that this doesn't happen and stop those bulldozers.
Just for the benefit of everyone here, Ross Costa has been driving our response, and each of us were given a different section of the EIS to comment on. The section that I was given was a preliminary bird and bat strike assessment, and this forms the hazards and risk and the biodiversity assessment components of the draft EIS. Now, I'm speaking directly from the biologist's report here. Why bird and bat strike is an issue? Since 1912, 120 aircraft have been destroyed due to bird strike incidents, with 60 of those incidents leading to the deaths of 297 people. Bird strikes cost the commercial aviation industry an estimated US $1.2 billion per annum. Australia's obligations as a contracting state to the Convention on International Civil Aviation, Australia has international obligations regarding the regulation and management of aviation safety. Australian civil aviation safety legislation includes provisions to meet Australia's international obligations under the Civil Aviation Safety Regulations Act of 1998, imposes an obligation on airports to reduce the risk of wildlife strikes. They had some consultant biologists involved. They were only given 3 days to do their scope survey. They did a desktop review of legislation requirements and other information. They were given 1 day to survey birds and bats and flying foxes at the airport site. And then under international standards, they also surveyed 2 days in the surrounding 25-kilometre radius of the airport site, which they're required to do. Their preliminary finding, they did actually find birds that are high at risk. You'll be interested in birds like galahs and magpies and so forth, birds that flock are a higher risk. They did find those bird species in the surveys that they did. And they considered it would be a high risk of strike risk at the airport site, and that the management could be risk to manage to a certain extent. Throughout their report, they have layered it with further assessment required to confirm their findings. So it's very limited data. They only did that data collection in March. There was no seasonal data, no nocturnal data. There was a significant gap in their survey, so they did not survey the Warragamba Dam catchment area, Lake Burragarang, areas of the Greater Blue Mountains National Park, World Heritage Area, and parts of the Nepean River that fell within that 25-kilometre radius area. Their mitigation strategies, they said they weren't able to give any details for that because there wasn't enough details about the airport design and construction. Flight paths themselves, 93% of bird strikes occur below 3,350 feet. Warragamba Dam is at 2,250 feet. So the flight path as it's currently designed, with big planes are very low down there, so there's a very big risk there. Also a biodiversity risk in those areas. So there's a serious of duty of care issue here by the Australian government, and they should not approve an inadequate safety assessment. And it's a significant note that the biologists also agreed further information.
Speaker's time's expired.
I'm an engineer in specializing in aerospace noise. The good professor here pretty much hit the thing on the head. I'd just like to say the government's EIS is dishonest with respect to noise in so many ways. I'll go into details, not here. Anybody wants, I'll tell them. The actual probable noise levels would be 100 times larger than what they are reporting in the EIS. I'll leave it at that.
I moved to Glenbrook 32 years ago to bring up my children in a quiet environment, one that you didn't have to smell the fumes of where my parents still live, and I thought that I would be able to live here in a quiet and environment and a non-smelly one. So I'm disappointed that they've already started building this airport and the transport. There's no forward thinking at all as to putting this airport in. No forward thinking as to the health of the people of the Blue Mountains and the wilderness and the national park areas. The noise levels, we're starting to hear them now, and it hasn't even really been fully impacted. So I'm really disappointed, and like everybody else, I think we should get together and just keep fighting. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
If it does go ahead, I will end up being a former resident of the Blue Mountains, and essentially would like to know from the federal government where I can send the cheque for my moving expenses. And that's pretty much it.
There's been plenty of data given out, but I just wanted to sort of say from a long-term Blue Mountains resident how it used to be in 1972 when I moved here. I was a little girl, I was 7, and there were no brown or dark flies. There were bright-winged creatures that used to fly in through the screen door, 25 or 30 of them in 30 seconds flat. Mum used to yell at me to shut the door really quickly because of all the beautiful creatures that used to come in. My brother used to say, "Oh, Tish, I really hate those birds out there. They wake me up in the morning at 5 a.m. There was 500 parrots out the front." You know, we used to sit there and laugh at the green frogs in the drains and the strange noises that they made at night. And it wasn't just the green frogs. There was about 10 different species. I used to look at all the beautiful cockatoos that we had and the myriad of species. And we've spent our lives running barefoot throughout clear streams and beautiful country. We had yabbies, we had trout, we had everything. Now, even without the airport, I'm already broken-hearted as a Stolen Generation descendant to see the damage that's been already done to the Blue Mountains. We are already struggling to keep this place as it should be. We've lost 50% of our wildlife across the world in the last 40 years. People, this kind of development is not sustainable. We need to keep some precious places for people to be able to commune with nature, both First Nations and colonial people that have come to make this place their home. We need to have that centre, and I think that that should be preserved. Thank you very much.
I'm not going to say anything that's much different from that's already been said, but I'll just come from the position that I came from Marrickville in Sydney. The flight path was more than evident, albeit there was a curfew at 11 o'clock. But I used to tell people that when the planes flew over my house, when the wheels went down, flies used to catch a lift to Mascot. That's how close it was. My whole house shook. It woke my children at night. It woke me at night. There was problems with the air quality and all these things that you've heard from better, more expert people than myself. I'm saying to myself, here we go again, and I'm absolutely despairing. But I'm not giving up either, so I'm urging all of you to keep on with the good fight. This project, if it goes ahead, will impact on social quality, environmental quality. The Penrith Basin and all the surrounding areas has the highest respiratory rate of illness in all of Australia. Imagine what's going to happen if this goes ahead. And that's just one of the issues. The issues are multiple. And it's no good saying 20 years down the track, oh, let's see what we can do about mitigating these problems that have happened. Let's not mitigate. Let's just stop it now. Keep fighting.
I came here, I was living in Bringelly, which is quite close to the Badgery Creek Airport, and I lived on a 5-acre bush block, and the birds there were amazing. You wouldn't believe how many birds were in such a residential area. And this is part of the Cumberland Plains bushland, which is endangered, and it's known that it's endangered. And this airport will just continue to destroy the Cumberland Plains bushland. Also, being a resident of Springwood will of course destroy all of our lives here. In the EIS, they talk about numbers and impacts of noise compared to background noise, but I don't think they take into account context. And the difference between a background of noise, which consists of birds and insects, and a background of noise that consists of city traffic. I think it's vastly different, and I don't think the EIS takes that into account at all. So I vehemently oppose this airport. Thank you.
There's been so many eloquent speakers tonight expressing the concerns and raising a lot of facts and validated research about the EIS. So I've decided not to go there tonight. I don't think my knowledge would match their knowledge. So I'm speaking off the cuff. I want to tell you a little bit about how I'm feeling, because maybe that'll resonate with a lot of you. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because I'm sure what I'm feeling in my heart is probably also what's feeling in your heart as well. So bear with me if I bore you. And this isn't about myself, but it's about how I feel and I think how you feel. I'm a different person than I was 6 weeks ago. I was pretty carefree, happy, going about my daily life, probably taking for granted where we live. Because when you've been here for so long, you just accept that's the part of what you're living in. So I sort of don't like how I've become, because the happy, carefree person is becoming a person that's full of anxiety, a little bit of depression, and very scared, snappy at the children, at the family, because I'm just engulfed in this feeling that I'm losing something very precious to me. And I want to let you all know that probably what I'm feeling is what you're feeling, and I'm really empathise with how all of you must be going through, and the community that are not here tonight. When something is threatened, whether it's your health or someone sick in the family, or your lifestyle, it's very frightening, and you have a lot of fear, and you become a different person. So I think probably to overcome that is for all of us to realise that we're not alone in this, and that we all support one another, and know that, I guess, also with council have your back. And I'm just blown away to think that there's so many people up here tonight, different political affiliations, but they're coming together and they're putting that aside, and they're up there empathising with us too, and they're saying, let's get together as a community, let's fight this, and let's put whether you want the airport or not want the airport aside, and just rally together to come together to say this is wrong. Community only becomes community, I think, when you unite. Usually we're quite individual, but I just want to say one more thing, just one more little thing. I want to apologise to the Indigenous people, because for the very first time in my life, I have a little taste of what it feels like to have something taken away from you. Thank you.